Hello and welcome to Trinity Talk Live, water cooler conversation from a Christian perspective. I'm Ken Coughlin.
And I'm Ben Lander.
And we are back. Thank you very much, everybody, for being understanding where we took last week off because we didn't have an arc. And that's really the excuse. No, I mean, if you remember, there's a couple, just like 2 episodes before that, where because we were in the middle of a thunderstorm, we actually lost our internet and we actually had to start a new stream. It would have been much worse last week. We had a lot of dangerous flooding around here and all that. So thank you for understanding why we weren't on the air last week. But that was it. We had the remnants of what was Hurricane Ida, right? Ida coming through. And it was tropical depression by the time it got to us. But there were some pretty good winds, but mostly it was just the volume of rain was huge.
We had a tornado.
We did, yeah. And I do want to, on that note, say express our prayers for the people that are still struggling. You know, both where it first made landfall down in Louisiana, and a lot of flooding up in the New England, like New Jersey and New York area. They've been dealing with a lot of flooding up there, and it's kind of like the opposites because down where it first made landfall, it's my understanding that while there was certainly a lot of flooding as well, they really got hit hard by the winds, and then up here we really got hit hard with just the volume of rain. And so it was, So that's why we weren't on the air. Please pray for people that are still facing that, and we appreciate your understanding on that. Also, I should give the opening spiel, I guess, that if you're new to the show, what it's all about is summarized right there in that byline underneath us. We are water cooler conversation from a Christian perspective, which means we try to talk about whatever people out there are talking about around the water cooler, but we try to bring the unique perspective to it that we talk about it by putting Jesus Christ first and giving Jesus top priority, which is something that is sadly harder to find on the interwebs nowadays. You may agree with us, you may disagree with us, but hopefully we'll at least exemplify that's what we're trying to do. Speaking of agreeing or disagreeing with us, you're invited to do precisely that. This is a conversation show, which means Ben and I will talk. Mary Kay, our lovely producer, will chime in periodically, and I can call her lovely. She's my wife. And she is objectively lovely as well. But also, we invite you to be part of the conversation as well.
Recovery.
The way you are joining the conversation right now is we are live streaming currently both on the Trinity Joppa Facebook page and the Trinity Joppa YouTube channel. If you're watching us on Facebook, you put your comment or question right there in the comment section of the video on Facebook. If you're watching us on YouTube, put your comment or question in the live chat on YouTube. I have them both pulled up here on the computer screen in front of me, so once there is a natural break in the conversation, I will read your comment or question live on the air, and we'll interact, and we'll talk back and forth, and you can put another one, and again, as long as the comments are appropriate, that's all we ask, just be polite, be respectful, and we will endeavor to do the same. I do want to say, because last time we were on the air 2 weeks ago, I was having an OCD attack where we were at 1,199 subscribers. And anybody out there that's OCD, you feel me, right? That was not good. And the funny thing was, we joked around about the fact that it's now all this and just don't lose any subscribers. We wanted to gain 1 subscriber just so it wouldn't be that one-off. It was bugging me. We actually did lose a subscriber during the show, or actually later on that evening. He went down to 1,198. And as much as that was not the goal, I was able to sleep better at night. So that was good. But I do want to thank everybody who has subscribed over the past couple of weeks, because we are actually well over that now. I think we're at 1,212 or something like that. But that doesn't mean you can't subscribe. Please subscribe to the channel, especially if you'd like to torture me. Let's get it up to $12.99 and get that one-off number there again. No, but seriously.
Speaking of OCD, just a sidebar here. I got to really use my points. I don't know if you have the Chick-fil-A app, but I got Chick-fil-A tonight. But my total points on the Chick-fil-A app are 666 points.
Dude, no,
on
wrong.
Chick-fil-A. So I really got to use up those.
I remember back when we were just still building this channel a while ago, and when we hit that 666 subscriber mark, believe me, I put it on all our social media pages. I said, really? You're Christians. You can't let this happen. You know? And it, blink of an eye, boom. We got over that number. Nobody wanted to be on that one. But anyway, thank you very much for watching. Thank you for subscribing. We do ask that you do please like this video, subscribe to the channel so you can stay up to date on everything we have going on here at Trinity Lutheran Church in Joppa, Maryland. And share the video as well. We've got a lot of good topics we're going to talk about, and the more people that see it, the merrier.
Yeah.
I do want to mention, before I forget, I've talked about how you can interact with us if you are live, watching us live on the show, and that's through the live chat or the comment section. But if you're not watching this live, you're watching it on replay after the fact, you can still be part of the conversation. What we try to do is every week, we will start off the show by revisiting comments from the previous episode that were made on YouTube. Now, we do ask, because Facebook, it gets a little harder to find. It falls down through the feed pretty far. But if you're going to have a comment for us and you're not watching us live, put your comment in the comment section on the YouTube video. And then we will look back at that before the beginning of the next week's show. At the top of the show, we will take up any of those comments. I will say, as far as last week's show, the only comment we got was from Allison Mayer. Thank you, Allison. Shout out to Allison.
Technically 2 weeks ago.
Technically 2 weeks ago. Right. Last episode 2 weeks ago, where she was the only one who tried to hazard a guess as to what the new set pieces were. Now, last week we had 3, and they were at some point all visible, and those 3 are still all up there. But now we have even more new set pieces behind us. And so the question is, who can guess? How about we just put it this way? Who can guess the most new set pieces? Now, I do have to give a little bit of a hint. All right, the Lay's potato chips and the Subway sandwich are my dinner. Those are not set pieces. I just haven't gotten to finish eating yet. All right.
Should I pan up?
No, don't. I mean, they can figure it out. If they're regular viewers of the show, one thing up there, they should know what it is. It's not new. Yeah. I mean, Mr. Stay Puft here has been on the show quite a bit. But the idea is to see who can name the most new set pieces that are here on the shelves behind us. And you'll win nothing other than we will recognize you live on the air. Or maybe I can give you a potato chip. You come by to pick it up, I'll toss you a chip. So anyway,
no guarantees on its condition.
No, or making it to you, So anyway, so thank you very much for joining us. Please be part of the conversation as we go through the topics tonight. Why don't we go ahead and get started? We have 4 topics tonight, so we do want to get through them get started on them as soon as we can.
You asked me to read you something.
Oh, I did. Oh, thank you, Mary Kay, because let me explain what you're reading first.
Okay.
So Allison's comment about the guessing was the only thing last week, and she was not correct. So still nobody's gotten it correct. But 2 episodes ago, so 3 weeks ago, 2 episodes ago, she also had a comment on something we were talking about, which I promised her we would take up. Well, it was supposed to be last week's episode, but then we didn't have last week's episode. And the reason it didn't appear, and this is a good tip for anybody out there, the way the YouTube channel is set up, it does not let you put links in the comment section, the live chat or the comment section of YouTube. And the reason for that should be obvious. There are internet trolls who put some very bad links out there. And so we don't allow links in the comment section. She was just innocently trying to link, I guess, to some articles.
Right.
But that's why her comment didn't appear. But we did talk to her afterwards, realized the comment was there. I was able to go back and find it. And so Mary Kay, because I actually can't get it to show up on my screen here, Mary Kay is going to go ahead and read it to us now, and then we will comment on her comment from 2 episodes ago.
Cool.
Okay, I'm going to do my best, but, somebody made the font size on this really, really small. Okay, so this is regarding Alta Fixler, the 2-year-old Jewish toddler who is in a UK hospital. She was born premature and has never seen the outside of that hospital. The parents, she calls them Haredi. I thought they were Hasidic. I don't know the difference, but it's against Israeli law and Jewish tradition for her to take her off of life support. So the hospital wants to take her off life support. The family is against that, and it got taken to the High Court in the UK, and the hospital was supported. It got taken to, I think it was called the European Supreme Court. They also backed the hospital. Now the parents are just asking for her to die in their quote home, and I will say quote home because her parents are joint U.S. and Israeli citizens. So the home that they have there in the UK is a rented flat that they've just taken out so that they can live near their daughter for the last 2 years. So it says apparently the family has dual citizenship in Israel and U.S. but the UK hospital is not letting go. And like I said, it sounds like they just happened to be in the UK when the wife went into premature labor. Now, Allison is also saying that apparently this judge in the UK allowed a child with traumatic brain injury, which is what Alta Fixler has from being born premature, to be transferred to Italy, and she's improving.
Mm-hmm.
And she's included
Shocker.
a link there.
Wow.
Not to say the British courts are tyrannical, but they certainly do not value human life and reduce life to social engineering. This article describes more of the rationale in British medicine. So there's another link there to a UK article. A quote that is scary, Allison says, and here's where it starts, quote, "If life-shortening and deliberate interventions to kill infants were available, they might have an impact on obstetric decision-making, even preventing some late abortions, as some parents would be more confident about continuing a pregnancy and taking a risk on outcome."
In other words, if you had the freedom to kill the child after it was out of the womb, so you could wait until the child's out of the womb to see if there's really any developmental disorders or anything.
I guess so.
And then,
Wow.
yeah.
And then she said this one too, another quote, "The college called for, quote, active euthanasia of newborns to be considered as a part of an inquiry into the ethical issues raised by the policy of prolonging life in newborn babies." And she says, not sure how active euthanasia prolongs life in newborn babies, ...
Oxymoronic.
Yes. So just an update. Now, this latest article that I was able to find, and I don't have it up right now. I was reading it before. Yeah, I don't have it up right now. I was reading it before we came in here to shoot the show. It was dated August 29th. The family is trying to get her to come to their flat, and the hospital is basically throwing up a lot more obstacles, and everything that the family seems to be doing to try to overcome those obstacles is not enough. However, the hospital does want to transport Alta to a hospice care facility. It didn't sound like it was in Manchester, but my UK geography isn't great, so I'm not really sure exactly where. But it has to do with the inability to transport her safely on all of the machinery to and get into the flat that they've rented with all that machinery, so that the ventilator, she could be taken off the ventilator in the flat, and the parents' abilities to perform palliative care for their daughter.
It's the same basic rationale as, remember, we were talking about before, where they were saying, well, we don't know if Israel is a safe enough place with all the violence going on there for her,
Right.
so we're not going to let you move her there. Instead, we're just going to kill her here.
Right.
You know?
Yeah.
I do want to
Makes no
comment
sense
on
whatsoever.
something there that Allison pointed out, and it was kind of what I was asking you about, Mary Kay, where you talked about this idea about, well, maybe if we just allowed abortion essentially
Late term.
or
actually,
after birth,
yeah.
then you might not have as many late term abortions, because people might be more willing to risk, women might be more willing to carry the baby to term just to see, what the baby, to know for sure what, so we don't have these cases where we think maybe there's some kind of disorder there in the kid, so we abort the child, and it turned out the baby could have been just fine. As if, babies that are born with Down syndrome or something like that don't have a right to life.
Right.
What I find interesting about this, though, is the fact that this is now just being proposed almost matter-of-factly. And I will tell you, back in 2012, and this is what made me think of, there were two doctors, two philosophers, I apologize, Alberto Giubellini and Francesca Minerva, who wrote an article in the Journal of Medical Ethics. And this was in 2012. And when this came out in 2012, and I'll read you the passage in a second, the reaction to it was, outrage. Basically, on all sides, people were like, "Oh, that's unrealistic. That's never going to happen." These are guys outliers. Here's what they actually said. Said when circumstances occur after birth such that they would have justified abortion, what we call afterbirth abortion should be permissible. We propose to call this practice afterbirth abortion rather than infanticide to emphasize that the moral status of the individual killed is comparable with that of a fetus rather than to that of a child. Therefore, we claim that killing a newborn could be ethically permissible in all the circumstances where abortion would be. Such circumstances include cases where the newborn has the potential to have an at least acceptable life, but the well-being of the family is at risk. This was actually in the Journal of Medical Ethics, published in 2012, okay? And again, lots of times when I used to bring this up back then, people would say, oh, that's just an outlier, that's ridiculous, nobody's taking that seriously. Wow. And now here we see it being taken seriously. And I want to say that in that quote that I just read you from the Journal of Medical Ethics, I actually agree with part of it. And I agree with it in this regard. If it's okay to do something to the unborn, then there's nothing that distinguishes in any relevant or medical philosophical terms the unborn from the toddler, from the newborn.
I was just going to ask, once you move it to after birth abortion, then what distinguishes newborn from infant? Where is the
there literally is no biological, scientific, philosophical line. There isn't.
Right.
And that's so. This is what you see when you start to say that well, the fetus doesn't have rights because that's not a human being with rights. Then there's really nothing to stop you going to the next philosophical and logical step, which is the newborn doesn't have those rights. And that's exactly what these doctors were proposing in 2012, and it seems to be exactly what's being proposed here, or at least mentioned here.
So what's the difference if they're 2 weeks old versus 2,000 weeks old?
Yeah. And we might talk a little bit more about this. I don't know. We'll see what we get into. We're going to be talking a little bit about the Texas abortion law here in a little bit. But that's the kind of thing that, and we talked in earlier episodes about the differences in the philosophy of the UK versus the United States as far as parental rights and everything like that. So I don't think we need to go back into all of that. But that comment, Allison, made me think of that. Anyway, that article I used to read.
It's just still like, I think this is the third time we've touched on this story, and it's still hard to wrap my head around that it's actually
happening.
Yeah, and with seemingly not much pushback.
Yeah.
Well, they did say in the article that I read that unfortunately, a lot of the people who are, let's say, the ground workers in the hospital, the people who are actually taking care of people, are getting a lot of pushback from and bad and maybe nasty comments and everything about, why won't they just let this girl go? And it's probably not them. Do you know what I'm saying? It's probably not them that is backing all this play and of trying to keep her there and control where she gets care. And so I feel for them because they're suffering instead of their bosses, who are probably the ones making the decisions. But I also just want to throw out there that some of the care that they said that this daughter was the daughter was going to need is care that my mother and I were both trained on in order to care for my father when he first came out of the hospital for a stroke.
Yeah, it's easily given.
So the notion the parents couldn't do it is ridiculous.
I don't know her particular case, but taking care of a trach tube, taking care of feeding somebody who's being fed through either a stomach tube or the tube might actually go through their nose. Taking care, because dad's originally did. Taking care of somebody who needs oxygen, taking care of somebody who my dad wasn't on oxygen, but my grandmother was. At the same time, my dad was getting all this other stuff. I just, managed medication. I mean, I don't know what kind of medication she's on, but it also seems suspect to me that a judge was willing to allow a child to be moved to Italy. Yeah. And that child is.
Well, and that one I'll say we don't know, and I apologize, I didn't get to read the article. I mean, there's traumatic brain injuries or developmental brain injuries, and there's brain injuries, So I don't know what the circumstances were. It's possible there's some relevant medical difference between the two. Without reading the cases, I don't know. But you're right, it makes you go, So anyway, hey, Ben, catch. There you go.
They're using the talking ball. Oh.
Don't. When I do wacky things, do me a favor. Just don't comment. Just go with it. Just go with it. You'll catch on before the end of the episode, I'm sure.
Let's see what you did there.
See, Katie Lander here on YouTube says, is there a financial incentive to the hospital if she dies there? Do they get more from insurance or other billing practices? If so, maybe this has something to do with it. I can't speak to the UK, but in the US, the answer to that would be yes, because as opposed to home care and getting palliative care at home,
right.
Because number one, the agencies are often different. It's not necessarily the hospital itself that's providing the hospice care. You have actually a hospice agency or whatever, or lots of times a different hospital that provides hospice care. I mean, it could be, I guess. But you're certainly not getting, not racking up the room charges and everything like that.
Yeah, so. Of course. Or $15 for a single aspirin. Literally.
They might still get that if they're providing the medicines. I don't know. So I don't know if that's an issue in the UK, but it certainly could be.
I will have to look it up, but there was a rather disturbing quote that basically said something along the lines of it would be preferable in the hospital's mind. And I wish I could find the exact quote, so I apologize for that. I'd have to go, I'm trying to find the article, but I'm not sure I can find it in time. But they said that it would be preferable for her to be moved to the palliative care hospice facility they mentioned, because then they would be able to offer her bed to another critically ill child, her bed in the PICU, the pediatric ICU,
right,
to another critically ill child.
You know what else would offer her bed is if they let her transfer to Israel.
She would just transfer to Israel or the U.S. or to her parents' flat.
Right.
So anyway, all right, we got to move on because we still got 4 stories to get through here. So let's move on to our first official story of the day. Now, this one's a little bit, we're focusing on one aspect of it, but obviously it's been 2 weeks since we've been on the air, and a lot has happened in Afghanistan over the course of that time. Last time we were on the air was prior to the U.S. withdrawal. It was the day after our last show was when there was the terrorist attack on the airport that killed 13 service members and a large number of Afghans as well.
And wounded 15 others.
Wounded 15 others, yeah. Obviously, since that time, the U.S. has withdrawn all of its troops. And we've seen, there's been talks of, people trying to get out who are supposedly have the appropriate documentation, but because there's no embassy there anymore, there's nobody to verify the documentation, and you've got some of the Taliban basically refusing. There was apparently some private planes that were brought in to get people out, and the Taliban's refusing to let them leave. So there's a whole lot going on that we could be talking about over the course of the last 2 weeks. The story that we're kind of leading into this, we're focusing on here, though, was one of, courage and, frankly, I think love, that I think does exemplify the attitude that we as Christians should have. And so something else that was happening, and this was prior to August 31st, prior to the withdrawal, during that last week or so. But, the Taliban were surrounding Kabul's airport, and there were about 6,000 U.S. troops that were holding control of the airport itself, but not the surrounding area. And so a lot of people were reportedly having difficulty or being fearful or whatever of even leaving wherever they were, hiding, and then getting to the airport because they weren't sure that they'd be able to get there safely with the Taliban kind of between them and the airport. And so there was a group of volunteers, mind you, because the U.S. military was not doing this. The U.S. military was putting its troops at the airport and only staying at the airport. They weren't actually going out to actually try to find people. Well, there was a group of volunteer veterans, and it sounded like maybe some were even active duty as well, American veterans who organized what was dubbed the Pineapple Express. And what they were doing is they would actually go into Afghanistan to try to find some of their Afghan allies. So, Afghan soldiers, troops, whoever who fought alongside them, translators who helped them translate, anybody who was working with the United States over the last 20 years whose life is now in danger. And they were going into Afghanistan trying to find these people and escort them past the Taliban and into the U.S.-controlled area of the airport. And they would do this. It was kind of they were using cell phones and things like that. And what they would do is they would send people essentially GPS coordinates, places, okay, you're to meet here. And this is where you're going to go, but wait until you get the green light from our coordinator. And the coordinator would give them the green light. And once they got the green light, they went to bed at that location. They'd get them in, usually under the cover of night. And then I'm not sure why, but apparently the way they identified themselves is they would get a signal on their phone that had a big pineapple on it. And so then when they get to the airport, they'd hold up the pineapple, a picture on their phone.
I think it's a movie reference. Wasn't there a movie called Pineapple Express? I think Sylvester Stallone was in it.
You could be right. And it's embarrassing to me if I don't know that because I'm the movie guy. But apparently...
For the record, I haven't seen that movie, but I remember.
But you remember the name?
Yeah.
That would not surprise me in the least. So they'd hold up on their smartphone with a graphic of a pineapple, or yellow pineapples on a pink field is what they would show, and that would get them into the airport. Now, looking back on the effort that these volunteers did, they say they saved, at least by their count, 630 Afghan lives during the course of that time before, obviously, the planes stopped leaving. Anyway, so what were your thoughts when you read about this effort?
I think in the midst of everything that's going on in Afghanistan, I like the way you led into this, that there's so many sides that we could take on this. But I think this is kind of one of those bright spots in that. It's kind of a little bit more uplifting. I think it was...
Hear that, honey? It's an uplifting story.
Yeah, that's our token uplifting
Literally, because they got on a plane and then they were uplifted.
But no, I commend, obviously their bravery. It's nothing short of heroic.
All right, I'm just going to cut in. It is the name of a movie.
Mm-hmm.
Sylvester Stallone was not in it. It was written by Seth Rogen and others, and he is one of the stars.
Seth Rogen, Sylvester Stallone. You can understand how you get those two confused. It's real simple. I mean, they're practically twins.
Right.
In the same way that Arnold Schwarzenegger and Danny DeVito were twins.
I get that reference.
You got that reference.
Oh, yeah. I got that reference. I don't know what it has to do with what they're doing, though, because it's something about a process server and his marijuana dealer winding up on the run from hitmen and corrupt police officers after witnessing a crime.
We are not condoning. We are not recommending.
Like I said, I never saw the movie. I remember the name of it.
It's rated R, so I'm just saying.
All right.
But
I'm doing my fact check.
Well, thank you. I certainly commend their bravery, their heroism. Biblically, from a Christian perspective, I mean, that's what you do. Greater love has no other than this, that a man lay down his life for his friends, or even in this case, for acquaintances or strangers. And so, actively putting their lives on the line to get as many people out. Yeah, it's nothing short of heroic. It's unclear. There was one point in there that maybe you had better clarity on this. It said that they defied orders, but if they're veterans, they weren't active duty. How did they have orders?
I think some were active duty, and some. I think it was a combination. Is my impression I got. Yeah. So, and I'll tell you, yeah. I mean, it's amazing, and it's one of these stories that makes you wonder. What would I do? And I mean, I like to think I know what I would do, and I know my wife yelled at me one time. This is a few years back because I would go to get us dinner from a particular Taco Bell. I won't say where it's located because I don't want to influence anything. It's a much better area now. But I'd go to this particular Taco Bell on the way home. And it seemed like there was 2 times in a row that I went there.
Was it in Portland?
I'm not
sorry.
2 times in a row I went there that, let's just say, some type of illegal activity was occurring. And she got very not mad at me. I mean, she understood, but I didn't.
You're making me sound bad.
I didn't leave. No, I didn't leave, and sometimes I actually went up, but I kind of got in the middle of stuff.
He put himself in some dangerous positions,
and I contacted the police and all of that. She just didn't want me going to that particular Taco Bell anymore.
It's like, why does it always have to happen when you're there?
I look back on that, and I'm like, it's like, okay. Compared to what I did, what I did was like peanuts compared to the danger. Can you imagine the danger that these people were willing to put themselves into in order to do what's right? To fulfill promises to these people that we said we would help get out. I mean, It does, and I don't want to belabor this point too much. I've said it in the previous weeks. We talked about this. I'm not a fan of. I don't trust the government. Period. By and large, but it obviously I do think that this whole withdrawal was bungled. Is a polite way of saying it. But when I hear things like this, you hear the administration go on air and say things about how successful this was, the most successful airlift in history, and blah blah blah. Okay, you created the need for this airlift and then take credit for it. But leaving that aside, but part of the success, if you want to call it that, of this airlift was these people going out and doing what the United States government, and I don't blame our soldiers, obviously, I'm talking about the higher ups, what they were unwilling to do. Yeah. So part of that success that you're taking credit for was because of
actively against your order.
Yeah, and so there's kind of a logical disconnect. So you don't get credit for that. I'm sorry. These people were on those planes because these brave soldiers went out and veterans went out and got them. Otherwise, they wouldn't have been on those planes.
Right.
They would have been more people who would have been left behind.
And there's still others that they were unable to.
Well, and that's the other thing I was going to say that made me think of. You can go ahead. Just the numbers that are still there.
Right. Which I don't know the latest count or whatever or estimate. Really, I guess it's hard to tell an exact count.
Yeah.
But we are seeing. I think we've touched on this before too. Stories of those who have posted things online, tried to hide their identity, but said, some are choosing to stay. Some Christians have chosen to stay, and others didn't choose, but just couldn't get there. In large, partly because of the explosion. Anyway, so now the U.S. was telling them to stay away from those areas, and so the deadline came, and those people
come to this area if you want to get away. Oh, stay away from this area, though.
Yeah.
It's like, but yeah. And the last I heard, I think the last number I heard as far as American citizens, where they were estimating around 100 American citizens still there. But you're talking thousands upon thousands of whether it be, if you combine the numbers with green card holders and, and legal residents and, of course, Afghan allies, people who were working with the military, you're talking thousands upon thousands of people that are still there. And I'm sorry, I just have no faith. We keep hearing the line that, we're working to try to get them out. We're working to try to get them out. You have no embassy there anymore. You have no presence whatsoever. How exactly are you working to get them out? And
I guess it should be said in terms of just the larger story as it unfolds, because we did hear about the attack, and the president did go on record saying that we would have a swift response to it. They did send in drone strikes.
Some debate about how successful they were.
Right.
Yeah, I mean, and I don't know if it's ever been verified or not. I know there were one response was that at least one of the drone strike killed a family. Yeah, I don't know. And I don't know if that's true. I'm not saying it's true. This is what the report was. I don't know if they've ever gotten any verification of that. But he did do something, yes. I'm not going to get into a debate about whether what he did was enough or whatever.
It's still ongoing. It's still very much not resolved. So,
well, in part because my interest in talking about this is not so much. I don't want to get into the proper military response and all of this. I'm not. My interest is in suffering people. Yeah. That's what gets me about this, and that's what makes me passionate about talking about it. Is because there are people who are suffering, and there are people who did right by us, so to speak, and now they're paying the price for that. And to me, I think there's a moral responsibility not to let that happen, regardless of political fallout here in the U.S. There's a responsibility not to let that happen. But
yeah, absolutely.
Anyway, all right. Why don't we move on to our second story? See if it's a little more uplifting. Well, that one was the uplifting story.
That was the bright spot of the whole
whole show. It's all downhill from here.
So our next story, we have really it's wrapped around kind of similar theme. It's wrapped around a larger story that's been unfolding, but these are two articles in response to it. So you may have heard of the Texas heartbeat bill that has been placed into effect. That went into effect, according to one article, it was last Wednesday, right?
Yeah.
So it went into effect a week ago. Basically, this bill, if you're unfamiliar with it, effectively will ban abortions after 6 weeks pregnancy, which is when a heartbeat typically can be detected. That's, I guess, the wording of this bill is that once a heartbeat is detected, then it becomes unlawful to perform a abortion in very rare circumstances. In terms of there are some rare exceptions in terms of medical distress for the mother and child, but it does not make provision for the cases of rape or incest. Also, interestingly, with this bill is that it not only the way that it's worded is a little bit different than other bills that have maybe come before it, because it's not the Texas government per se that is going to be enforcing this, but effectively, there's a provision in there that anyone, you don't even have to be necessarily directly related to the mother or infant, but anyone can sue somebody who has actively aided in that abortion. That could mean the healthcare professionals who performed it, or even somebody who funded it or paid for it. So that you can, and they're entitled to at least $10,000 plus court fees and all of that. So there's, I guess, incentive there to police this amongst the population. So there's been a big response from this, understandably. So two of them, I'll talk about the Tripwire, which is a software company, I think a video game software company. The CEO of Tripwire actually made a tweet in response to this bill in support of it. So the tweet said, proud of U.S. Supreme Court affirming the Texas law banning abortion for babies with a heartbeat. This is Gibson, the CEO of Tripwire. Said, as an entertainer, I don't get political often, yet with so many vocal peers on the other side of this issue, I felt it was important to go on the record as a pro-life game developer. Well, that tweet was met with very swift vehemence and called for this CEO's resignation, which he has resigned from Tripwire, and the acting CEO in their place, interim CEO, and the company released a statement saying that the former CEO's views do not express the views of the platform in general, of Tripwire. And so, basically saying that they're on the other side of the aisle. Another interesting response to this heartbeat bill is Portland. Again, the city of Portland has said that they're going to cut trade and travel with Texas, the entire state.
Portland, Oregon, not Maine.
Yes, Portland, Oregon. Yeah,
and not Portland, Texas, Mary Kay. I know. You lived in a tiny little town that nobody knows. It doesn't even appear on most maps.
Hey.
That was also called Portland.
Oh, wow.
Yes, I lived in Portland, Texas.
Well, that one would be very difficult to cut off travel to Texas.
And I'll have you know that the high schools in Corpus Christi knew about us.
They didn't really, because you didn't even have you didn't have your own high school. You had to share it with the neighboring town, Gregory.
No.
It was Gregory Portland High School. You weren't big enough to have your own high school.
We had our
even Havre de Grace has its own high school.
Okay, you need to stop because Havre de Grace didn't have its own independent school district. It was GPISD. Thank you very much. It was Gregory Portland Independent School District. And
They
yes,
felt
we
bad
only
because
had
they
one.
They didn't have their whole high school, so they called themselves a district.
We were a 4A high school, which in
Still salty about it.
excuse me.
Anyway, Portland, Oregon.
Portland, Oregon, to be clear, yes, has responded to this as well, stating that they are going to cut trade and travel. Now, it is unclear how exactly that is going to pan out for them, but they're holding out until either the bill is revoked by Texas lawmakers or it's overthrown by the Supreme Court again. And there's another case that is out of Mississippi with a similar kind of law that's gone into effect in Mississippi that the Supreme Court is going to hear later on this year.
It's a 15-week ban there in Mississippi.
Yeah. So it's just similar, but in Mississippi, it's later on in the pregnancy. So the thought process there is that perhaps the Supreme Court's going to make the ruling basically effective for both of these cases in that hearing. But yeah, just overwhelmingly, the response, at least in these two instances, has been in defiance and opposition to this bill. What are your thoughts?
Well, I'm gonna talk about the Tripwire one first, maybe try to break it down a little bit. Otherwise, I'll just be talking for the rest of the show. But I do want to start out by talking about some of the legal misunderstanding that's going on. And this is a complete side note. It's just a pet peeve of mine. I've watched a few TV shows every now and then, and normally when you see a courtroom drama, it's always the trial court. And eventually, every now and then though, you see one of these television dramas try to depict an appellate court, right? And I can't remember what show it was. This was a little while ago. I was watching some show that was trying to show an appellate argument, one of these higher court arguments, and they pulled out, they had a judge with one of these gavels, I got news for you. They don't use these things at the appellate court level. Matter of fact, they hardly ever use these things even at the trial court level anymore. But so anyway, that's just a total side note, but a little pet peeve of mine as a lawyer I had to throw out there. So the say nothing.
So on the nose.
Do you have any softballs back here?
Don't lean back too far. You don't want those things up there falling over on you. So they're kind of heavy. Anyway, I did. There's a lot swirling around here that I wanted to correct the record on something. Like even this article on the Tripwire thing says Texas Governor Greg Abbott signed the anti-abortion law in May. The law, called SB 8, went into effect last week, backed by a Supreme Court opinion that said it could take effect. No, not really, all right? And I've also seen people like championing what the Supreme Court did, saying, oh, this signifies that the Supreme Court's going to overturn Roe v. Wade because they affirmed this Texas law. No, they didn't.
Right.
Okay, no, they didn't. Understand something. Everybody's just completely taking what the Supreme Court did and just blowing it way out of proportion. The way this law is structured, and I will preface this with saying this, I can see the point of people who disagree with the law on this ground, all right? It makes these abortions illegal, but the government isn't the one that's enforcing it. Like you indicated, right. What it does, it creates a private right to sue, where an individual citizen can sue somebody, the Uber driver who takes someone to get an abortion even. I mean, essentially, I don't know how specific the law is, but that's at least what's being thrown out there, that it could apply even in those circumstances. And so it creates a private citizen has to sue someone, and that's how it gets enforced. It's not like you get called in a criminal court or anything like that. So in legal terms, in order to have a legal case that the courts are going to hear, you have to have the right parties, all right? The classic example of this is, let's say that some government passes some law that I think is going to impact me, and so, but they never actually charge me with anything, they never bring anything against me. I just try to kind of beat them to the punch, and I file a lawsuit against the government saying, you can't, I don't like this law, I want this law declared unconstitutional. Mm-hmm. The government comes back and says, well, you haven't been charged with a violation of that law, right. And most of the time when those types of circumstances come up, the answer is you don't have standing. There's not a dispute. There has to be a dispute first before you can actually have a legal case, all right? That's kind of what happened here, is that some people basically tried to bring a lawsuit against a judge and caption it that way. And the Supreme Court said, and I think even some of the lower courts said, there's no case here. That the Texas law is structured in such a way that a private citizen sues someone, all right? No private citizen has sued anyone. And so you don't actually have a case yet. If a private citizen sues someone, and then you want to appeal this up to the Supreme Court, that's a whole different thing. That's all the Supreme Court did, is they just said, we're not going to hear this because there's not actually a dispute yet. This is premature. But the moment someone files a lawsuit that's allowed under this law, it's still going to go up, and nothing that the Supreme Court just did is going to impact that in any way, shape, or form. All right? So the Supreme Court did not back the law. They said nothing about whether they favor the law or disfavor the law. They did not indicate they're going to overturn Roe v. Wade. Both sides are getting this completely backwards on that. So I wanted to mention that to begin with. Now, let's talk about, because I know you're going to love this one, the Tripwire case, or the Tripwire article. So we've got this situation where you're right, this CEO of a video game company, basically, and you read what his actual tweet said, and there were he's supporting the law, and what I found interesting is he says, yet with so many vocal peers on the other side of this issue, I felt it was important to go on the record as a pro-life game developer. I don't think anybody can dispute what he's saying there. There have been plenty of voices, corporate voices, individual voices, celebrity voices, blasting Texas right now, all over the place.
Right.
All right. I don't see any of them getting told they need to resign from their positions.
Yep.
All right. None of them. All right. And yet he tweets out support for this law, and a pro-life tweet, and all of a sudden there's a huge uproar, and he ends up having to resign from his position. And the reason he had to resign was, frankly, a business mandated it, because once he sent out his tweet, Shipwright Studios, a game co-developer, said it was canceling its existing contracts with Tripwire. Torn Banner Studios, another developer that worked with him, spoke out against the comments. So basically, all these other companies that Tripwire worked with started saying, we're going to cancel our contracts, or we're not going to work with you, speaking out against you. Well, it hit Tripwire in the bottom line. So do I think that Tripwire management, that these other companies, all that they were legally allowed to express their opinions in the way they do? Yes, legally, they are allowed to do that. I do agree with the Supreme Court decision a few years back that corporations are just collections of individuals. They have First Amendment rights. I have no problem with any of that. But there's two questions here. There's a legal question and there's a moral question. And even though, just because you're legally allowed to do something doesn't mean you should do it, all right? Do I think that these companies were legally allowed to come up and say, we're not going to deal with Tripwire anymore because of this CEO's comments? Sure, they're legally allowed to do that. Do I think it was the morally right thing to do? Heck no. I mean, you don't think there's such a thing as cancel culture? What are you looking at? I mean,
I think what we're seeing is not just cancel culture, and maybe I'm blowing this out of proportion, but that's dangerously close to corporate oligarchy dictating,
Yeah. I mean, is this really the society you want to live in?
Yeah. I mean, no, I don't. But yes, I agree.
I mean, it's downright scary. And if you don't think it's scary, I can almost guarantee you, this is me being my psychic powers through the camera, through the internet. If you're not scared by this, I would be willing to bet the vast majority of you who are not scared by this agree with the companies that are, again, you disagree with the Tripwire CEO, that you don't like the Texas abortion law, all right? And yet, if you are scared by this, you probably do like the Texas abortion law. Or not necessarily. I mean, I'm not crazy about it. I've told you some of the issues I have with it. So what I ask people to do is put the shoe on the other foot. What if corporate America doesn't agree with you, all right? There was a day when we could, all work together and go to the workplace. We didn't have to agree with everybody on everything, and we could still work together towards a common economic goal for our company.
Yeah, imagine a society where the opposite were true, where overwhelmingly there was support for this Texas abortion law, and then some dissenters voiced their opinion and were swiftly silenced. I mean, it doesn't take a lot of effort to imagine yourself on the other side.
I mean, and seriously, does the fact that he...
all you have to do is start reading something like, I don't know.
Orwell.
Yeah.
Well,
or Ayn Rand. What was the one where everybody had to refer to themselves in the plural and use numbers?
Oh.
I can't remember the name of the book. I had to read it my senior year. That scared me.
But, I mean, here's an easy way of looking at it. Does his view about whether it be specifically this particular Texas law or his, whether he's pro-life, pro-choice, whatever, does that have anything to do at all, in any degree whatsoever, with his ability to develop video games? Right. I mean, seriously, there is no connection between the two. Now, if there's a connection, I get you, all right? Yes, this man should not be the next president of Planned Parenthood. I'll give you that, okay? Because there is a connection there. But when there's no connection whatsoever, people's livelihoods should not be threatened because they think this way politically or that way politically.
Apparently, if there is a connection for you to do your job, it still doesn't matter. Spoiler for one of the next.
Yeah, true. So I mean that one I knew was. Here's the other thing that I found funny in a not funny way. You mentioned that Tripwire put out a statement in response to all of this. And they said things like, his comments disregarded the values of our whole team, our partners, and much of our broader community. Our leadership team at Tripwire are deeply sorry and are unified in our commitment to take swift action and to foster a more positive environment. More positive for who, Tripwire?
Our leadership are unified in our hive mind.
Yeah. Well, but here's the thing. I guarantee you if you have any decent number of employees there at Tripwire, you have employees who are pro-life.
Yeah.
How are they feeling right now, Tripwire? Do you really think that they're feeling like they're working in a more positive environment? What makes a more positive corporate environment is when you don't care how your employees feel about this issue or that issue, as long as they're unified behind your corporate goals. All right? So, no, you're not fostering a more positive environment.
Can you tell me again what his comment was?
His comment was, and I can read it to you again.
Quoting.
Proud of hashtag USS Supreme Court affirming the Texas law banning abortion for babies with a heartbeat, which is why I preface this by saying he was actually incorrect there. They didn't affirm anything. But that's the common thing that's going around. But then he goes on to say, as an entertainer, I don't get political often. Yet with so many vocal peers on the other side of this issue, I felt it was important to go on the record as a pro-life game developer.
And this was posted where?
Twitter.
On what handle?
His own.
Personal. His personal.
He said, I.
Yeah, it was his own. It wasn't the statement that I read from Tripwire was put out by Tripwire on their official.
But he never
media.
said anything about being connected to Tripwire
Nope.
or any of that.
No, not
Does
whatsoever.
his handle indicate that he's connected to Tripwire?
Not that's been reported. I
No,
can't
just
say
that
for
people recognize him as the CEO of Tripwire.
sure. Right.
But he's not putting it out in any way, shape, or form that makes it sound like it's from Tripwire.
Or he didn't mention it as being a game developer.
No, as an entertainer.
Entertainer.
Well, he
Yes,
said
he-
game. And said on the record, as a pro-life game developer is what he said.
Okay.
But it's
So?
yeah. I mean, we should be able to do that, and just like everybody, other people should be able to say if they're pro-choice. I will disagree with you. We'll have a nice discussion. Marketplace of ideas grows more prosperous as a result of it. That's a good thing. But yeah, that bugs me.
Yeah, and one other thing, so we've got the cancel culture over here, which is frightening. Another kind of caveat to this is that, the president went on record saying that it's un-American, and particularly there's a quote on the New York Post article about Portland's response, but it said it called it a whistleblower website asking for tips about abortion. So basically, there's a Texas Right to Life group which launched a website basically asking for whistleblowers to snitch on your neighbors or whatever if they had gotten an abortion or to facilitate people suing each other basically and the effective what's the word I'm looking for? I don't know, but basically to facilitate the governance of this law. So the president went on record saying it's almost un-American. Well, okay. So we look at this. There's this whistleblower website to snitch on your neighbors, which is un-American. But I remember distinctly a year ago where we had police hotlines for people to snitch on people who were gathering in groups.
Yeah.
And that was applauded. So to me, there's a disconnect.
Well, it all
there.
depends on whether you agree with the law or not.
Yeah.
I mean, that's exactly what it is.
Not that I'm condoning one or the other. I'm just saying there's an inconsistency.
Yeah. Hold on, I'm trying to find something. I'm blanking on someone's name here.
What are you looking for?
I don't want to spoil it. Hold on, I'm just trying to remember the guy's name.
They can't help you.
No, you can't. It's bugging me. I'll come up with it eventually. Anyway, so I do want to talk about that New York Post article as well that you were just talking about there a second ago, because there are a couple things on there that I wanted to mention. And again, this is the one now that talks about how the city of Portland, Oregon, is now banning trade and they're banning travel to the state of Texas. What's that? It's just it's just an apologist's name. It was Clinton, the guy Clinton worked for, who wrote a book. It's about an abortion book and how to talk about abortion people. And I have it at home, and I'm just drawing a blank on his name. And Clinton's probably not watching because he's
Tony
in California. What's that?
Tony Campolo, who's the religious advisor.
No, it's the guy who runs a pro-life organization, and he speaks all the time. I'm just drawing a blank on his name, and it's just bugging me. Anyway, I can make my point even without it and I'll remember his name as soon as we go off the air. But the couple things I want to talk about this. So the city of Portland, Oregon, is saying that we can't have any travel, we can't have any trade with the state of Texas at all in the state of Texas. First thing I want to mention is in their statement, this is one of the things they said. that speaking of the law in Texas, they said, this law rewards private individuals for exercising surveillance and control over others' bodies. It violates the separation of church and state, and it will force people to carry pregnancies against their will. There's so much in there I could disagree with, but I want to focus on that second statement here because I've seen this circulating the web a lot. I've seen it on Facebook, a lot of memes coming out there about this. It violates the separation of church and state. No, it doesn't. Okay? Please, 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 even if you're watching us and you're pro-choice, please stop saying that. Because when you say that the particular meme I saw the other day was somebody who just basically equated the pro-life position with a religious position, meaning it's exclusively a religious claim. All right? Now, let's be candid about it. Does the Bible teach that the life begins even in the womb, that there's a life there in the womb? Yes, it does.
Sanctity of life.
Yeah, it absolutely does. And so yes, it is, if you do truly hold the Bible to be the divinely inspired word of God, and that's authoritative, should you be pro-life? Yes, because that's what God says. All right? But that's not the same thing as saying that the pro-life movement and the pro-life position is exclusively a religious position.
Right.
No, it's not. And any philosopher, anyone who's even a layperson who has actually studied it and who has actually read any of the literature on the pro-life side knows that the moment you say that, you might as well be holding a giant neon banner with flashing lights over your head that says, I've never read a single thing from a pro-life author. I don't know what I'm talking about. Please don't listen to me. All right? You look that ridiculous. Please don't do it. And like one book I was going to mention, and that's why I was trying to remember the other gentleman's name. I couldn't remember him to recommend his book, but like Francis Beckwith. All right, Francis Beckwith is a philosopher. He's written a book called Defending Life, a Moral and Legal Case Against Abortion Choice. All right, he's one of the leading, very popular philosophers at the time on this issue. So here's my challenge. For anybody out there who's spreading memes that's equating the pro-life position and trying to say it's just a religious position, and keep in mind, this is very deliberate by some people, some lobbyists and things like that, some interest groups. They want you to believe it's solely a religious view because then they're going to say separation of church and state. You can't enforce your religious view on everybody, and they just completely ignore that the overwhelming number of arguments that are made for the pro-life position nowadays are biological, they're philosophical, they're scientific. All right, take a look at that Francis Beckwith book, Defending Life. It's what it's called, and look through that whole book. And I challenge you to find me any chapter that's saying you should believe this because the Bible says so. It ain't there. All right. Because that's not the way the arguments are made. They're made largely, scientifically, where they're talking about, the conceptus, the unborn, had its own unique DNA signature from the moment of conception, things like that. And they're talking and responding to some of the pro-choice positions from a philosophical standpoint, because even once pro-choicers then will concede that, well, if you can get them to concede that, okay, it is biologically a human being. So now, even though we know that it's indistinguishable biologically from any other human being, now we have to find some other reason why it's okay to kill it. So we're going to say it doesn't have its own right to life. It's not a person. So then you get into philosophical discussions. But none of these revolve around believe it because the Bible said so. I mean, that is a valid point to make for Christians, I think, because if you do hold the Bible to be the divinely inspired word of God, then you should take that seriously. Right. But that's the first thing that got to me is when I see these, I know it's a pet peeve, and I apologize if I'm coming across as too abrasive. It's not my intention, but for somebody who's been studying this issue for decades, and it bugs me to see it just blatantly misrepresented so much, and people
you almost wonder
believe
if that's
it.
Not intentional, though.
For some, it's not. I know it's not.
Right. No, I mean, like if the equation of that being a solely religious argument isn't intentional to discredit, and to
absolutely
discredit
it is.
the religious argument. Yeah.
And people do that on any political issue or whatever. People do that on both sides. Is we deliberately I don't say we. I try not to, but people do deliberately leave information out, bring other information in, twist something. And this is the type of thing. There in every good lie there's a seed of truth. Mm-hmm. Is there a religious? Does the Bible teach that that abortion is wrong because it does teach that the life is there even in the womb? Yes, the Bible does teach that. Mm-hmm. And so now you want to extrapolate from that. Therefore, it's solely a religious argument, completely ignoring all of this other stuff, which is the overwhelming majority of where the discussion is happening. I'm sorry, but you're lying to people. Once that's pointed out to you, All right. And if any of you out there, anybody watching this is sharing any of these memes that are equating it to just being solely a religious argument, saying separation of church and state, or saying don't force your religion on me, or any of those things like that. All right. If you're doing it innocently because you've just seen these things on the internet and you just automatically believe them, which is what a lot of us do, let's be honest. Okay. Fine. But from this point on, you know differently. All right.
And the fact of the matter is, Christianity is not the only religion that upholds the sanctity of life.
It's not.
Yeah.
You're right. And I mean, there's a whole Facebook group called Secular Pro-Life, which is all about people who are pro-life that are not religious whatsoever. Yeah. So that's a pet peeve of mine when I would hope that anybody would be able to recognize at least that basic principle. How would you feel if your viewpoints were just so blatantly misrepresented, and so people are discrediting your view without ever actually knowing your view, without ever actually looking at it rationally? You can understand why that gets me a little bit annoyed.
Sure.
So, all right. So that was the first thing I want to talk about. The second thing on this article, you thought I was on a soapbox before. Here's my speech. All right.
Wait, can I just say something?
Sure, because I was about to get on the soapbox.
Yeah,
So.
just to give you a break. Drink something more. My first response to them saying separation of church and state was, oh yeah? How about states' rights? You're not allowed to tell another state what their laws can be.
Yeah.
Well, and that kind of gets...
They have duly appointed, elected representatives to their state legislature, which they've set up. And what gives Portland, Oregon the right to tell people in Texas what they can and cannot do?
Well, and that kind of gets into my soapbox speech that I wanted to make here. And this is what we have here in the second story, is you have a governmental unit. Now, granted, it's just a city, Portland, Oregon, but I can certainly see trends like this continuing where you have one whole state. I mean, California has done that with Texas. They've had disputes about, well, we can't have state travel there. That's been a very common thing. But this goes even further, is no travel or trade, so we're not even going to buy a product, for example, that comes out of Texas. And that is starting to set a very dangerous precedent. And like I said, we're seeing a growth here. We started seeing states saying, when Georgia had their bathroom bill, we had states saying, okay, well, we're going to ban travel, any kind of state-sponsored travel to Georgia. No state-sponsored travel to Texas, whatever it may be, because we disagree with some law that another state has. Now that's evolved. We're seeing Portland saying no travel and no trade. Now we're not going to trade with you. We're going to cut the economic lines as well. The next step is that instead of just Portland, Oregon, we're going to see whole states doing this, and we're going to really start to see some division within our country. And Allison actually sent us this article, and one of the comments she made, Allison, I hope you don't mind me sharing this, when she sent it to us, was that she fears, I'm not going to quote her directly, I'm sure, but she fears that this is the path that leads to civil war. When you start to have this kind of division between your country. And here's my question that I want to pose to everybody out there who's watching. What does it mean to be the United States of America? What does that term united mean? If you've ever looked at money, for example, you've probably seen the phrase e pluribus unum. What's that mean? Out of the many, one. If you're familiar with our university system, and what does the word university mean? University literally means unity in diversity. That's where it comes from. These are the principles around which our united country is supposed to be built. That we are supposed to be not united, meaning everybody thinks the exact same way, everybody agrees on every single issue. That's actually the opposite of what it means. It means that we are a country where people are free to believe what they want, to believe different things, to have different views. Yes, under some broad constraints, but broadly, we are supposed to be a free country. And yet, despite that diversity, we are still unified. We still see ourselves, view ourselves as one unified nation. Things like this that Portland, Oregon is doing are endangering that. This is the path down which we cannot afford to go as a country. And so I'm trying to speak to anybody who's watching. I know we don't exactly have a whole lot of viewers on here, but any city councils, county councils, states, whatever, legislatures, any governmental entity out there, don't do this. Please don't tear our country apart. Embrace the diversity. We don't have to all agree to all be part of the same unified nation. It is the responsibility of those who are in our governmental leadership, above all else, I believe, to hold to that unity. Portland, Oregon shame on you. You have failed on that. You have decided that your personal views on this issue are more important than being the United States of America. And that simply will not do. Done.
Yeah. Mic drop. Well spoken. Yeah, I agree. Yeah, and I think this is the danger that we see when everything is so politicized, to the point where you're absolutely right. We can't have a differing opinion because we are no longer e pluribus unum, or we're no longer unity in diversity. It's unity in conformity, and that's a dangerous road to go down. So I think we're having audio issues.
Yeah, we're having audio issues in my big speech, of course. So now everybody shares the speech, and we're going to be out of sync here. We're still out of sync? Check 1, 2. We are. All right. What can we do about this? Let me think for a second. Give me a moment to think through this.
Audio is slightly ahead of video.
Slightly ahead of video.
Yep.
Yeah, I can see it there looking at the screen.
Yeah, but you can't hear what I'm hearing.
No. Okay. All right. I'm trying to think through what cables I've got here, but I can do something about this. All right. If I take that and so that goes there. That's XLR. That's my LP. All right. I've got a potential solution. We're probably going to lose audio for a minute, but what I'm going to ask us to do here, I don't know if Ben, you had anything else on that story or not.
I think you summarized it pretty well.
What I'm going to ask you to do then, Ben, if you could, even though I was supposed to introduce the next topic, if you can start introducing the next story, Mary Kay, go ahead and switch the lower third. And then when I'm about to cut out our audio, I will tell you to stop for a second. When we get to that point, we'll lose audio as I try to rewire something real quick. And then we'll get audio back, hopefully, if this all works. All right, go for it.
Cool. Bear with us. Yes. So our third story here, it's actually, we like to throw in studies every once in a while. This is one of those. This was sent to us by Pastor Jay. I actually mentioned it this past Sunday in the message. And there's a recent study that was published on August 31st by George Barna. If you're unfamiliar with who George Barna is, he is the lead researcher at the Cultural Research Center of Arizona Christian University. And he does lots of different reporting, researching on
Excuse me, is that Pat? Sorry.
the state of America. And particular, there's one that he releases annually. It's called the American Worldview Inventory, which, as it suggests, it studies worldviews of people in America. So this one that was released on August 31st is the American Worldview Inventory 2021. And this study largely looked at Christians in America and subdivided them into different categories, which I'll get into in just a second. But
And stop for a second. We're going to lose audio for a second, everybody. Say something, Ben.
all right, am I back?
Yeah.
Can
Does
you
that
hear me?
work?
I don't know. Talk some more.
All right. So what this study has done,
Yep.
it's
We're good.
awesome. Thank you, Ken.
This is why
Ken
they pay
fixed
me
it.
the not so big bucks.
Woohoo! Right. So this study kind of groups these categories, or groups people into 5 categories based on how they've answered these questions on their worldview. Particularly, it's aimed at Christians and how Christians can even be further subdivided into what views they actually hold. So 69% of Americans identify as Christians. So this study is focusing in on that 69% demographic.
I'm sorry, Mary Kay, real quick. Can you mute the audio from the camera? I routed the audio through on the switcher. I routed the audio through the mic input, and I just realized the camera is still unmuted. I don't know if that's going to give us any interference. The lower of the 2 red lights. All right, Ben, keep talking. We still coming through?
Still come through.
All right, good. I just wanted to make sure that there was no potential interference coming through from that what is now an empty input.
Cool.
So, sorry, go ahead.
No, that's good. Right. So these 5 categories that Barna kind of places self-identifying Christian as. Actually, the first category is self-identifying Christian, so it kind of encapsulates everybody who identifies as Christian. Then that next subcategory is self-identified born-again Christians. Then there are self-identified evangelical Christians. There are theologically born-again Christians, and each one of these has a meaning that we can go into. And then the last one is integrated disciples. So this basically is a ranking on, how closely these believers or professing believers hold to biblical worldviews, whether they consistently practice these biblical worldviews, and what some of these discrepancies are. So there are a slew of them, kind of as it goes through this study, but these are basic kind of principles. Namely, among them that the Holy Spirit is a real person of the Trinity. That and there's all kinds of issues. There's moral issues in here. There are whether a person can get to heaven, whether or not Jesus Christ is the only way to heaven, whether or not all religions are equal, and so it's actually kind of staggering what some of these responses are. So this is how it kind of breaks it down. There's the self-identified Christians. There are 69% of adults. Self-identified born-again Christians, there's 35%. Self-identified evangelical, there's 28%. Theologically born again, also 28%. And then here you go, the integrated disciples, those that consistently possess a biblical worldview and apply it, only 6%. So the findings seem to indicate that of those self-professing Christians, 94% do not hold consistently to a biblical worldview, even if they profess to be born again, or they're theologically born again, meaning that they hold to certain theological beliefs that we would consider biblically consistent, but not all the time. There's just so much data in this research that we can go for a long time about this. Some of the moral issues on here, though, it does break it down into political views as well. So you got liberal, moderate, conservative. Unsurprisingly, the integrated disciples trend largely conservative, whereas there's a larger degree of liberal leanings of just the broader range of self-identified Christians. There are here's the moral issues. Lying, whether or not lying is always wrong. The self-identified Christians, only 53% said that it was always wrong, whereas with the integrated disciples, 99% said that it's always wrong. Same thing with abortion. 98% of integrated disciples said abortion is wrong, whereas only 55% of self-identified Christians say that that's wrong. Unmarried sex, 32% of self-identified Christians say that that's wrong versus 97% of integrated disciples. And cheating on your taxes, 59% of self-identifying Christians say that that's wrong versus 99+% of integrated disciples saying that that is morally wrong. Basically, what this article is hinting at is that there are large gaps of profession of faith versus acting out our faith, I think is kind of how you can summarize that.
Yeah, and I will say that I did have one kind of moment looking at the study, and because when I read the article about it first, and I went back and actually read this kind of report by the Cultural Research Center at Arizona Christian University, which went into more detail about it. But it talks about how they divided, everybody up into these different categories. And when I read the article, I was kind of wondering how they classify those categories. And I went and saw the actual breakdown here from Cultural Research Center. It seems like, for the most part, the categories were based upon how people see themselves, self-identified Christians, self-identified born-again Christians, self-identified evangelical Christians, which is one that, I found interesting. It's like, okay, I was looking for what's the distinction between the two that the researchers were making, and it seems like the distinction here is just the labels that people attach to themselves. Right. Do you attach to yourself the label of born-again? Do you attach to yourself the label of evangelical? And not surprisingly, I guess, while there was a lot of crossover, fewer people were willing to identify themselves as evangelical than born again, because we talked before about how that term's kind of got baggage with it. Yeah. But then it went into things like theologically born again Christians and integrated disciples, and those categories. They weren't categorizing based on the same thing. In other words, the three categories were how do you identify yourself, and then the others were kind of based upon what beliefs you actually professed. So, I mean, it's great. There's still some very valuable insights from this study, but I think it's kind of misleading to say for the research, and like I said here, well, we kind of divided people up into these 5 categories. Well, you kind of divided them up into 3 categories and then separately divided them up into 2 categories, but those the way you were categorizing were different in those 2. So it wasn't like there were 5 categories by the same criteria. There were different criteria. I did, excuse me, find it interesting, obviously. What was it Pastor Jay said when he sent this to, I think both of us said, perhaps we should start worrying about, not, I'm going to misquote him, but it's something he said to me. I don't remember if it was in yours or just to me, but he said something along the lines of, maybe we need to really focus on the sheep,
Yeah, the mission field is basically in the doors of the church.
Right. It's not that it's not out there as well, but obviously there's a mission field right here in the church itself that we're not maybe recognizing it as much as we need to, because, how well are our churches teaching these beliefs? Now, look, you can go to church and you can have a pastor get up there and preach to you the criteria and all these points of the biblical worldview. And you may walk out of that church not agreeing with them. But what you shouldn't be able to do is to walk out of that church not knowing what they are. Right. And so it does, what we see is, what this study I think shows, is so many people are willing to say, we take the born again Christian category, to say that I am a born again Christian, and yet some of their beliefs, forget, on moral issues, they didn't even believe the fundamental parameters of what it means to be born again.
Yeah.
And so it's like, we're attaching a label to ourselves. People are attaching a label to themselves. They clearly don't even understand what that label means. Yeah. And this also goes, all you atheists out there who I debate with from time to time, who want to tell me that, oh, you Christians got nothing, 70% of the United States is all, Christian, or all Christians, and so you're clearly the majority here, and you're oppressing the minority. Research like this shows not so much, as far as what we actually advocate being a biblical worldview is actually overwhelming the minority view in the United States.
Yeah, and again, draws me to that, I guess, kind of same distinction that I made. It reminds me of Jesus' words: broad is the road that leads to destruction, narrow is the road that leads to life. And so, as a Christian response to this, I think it's appropriate to be sad over it, to lament that this is the state of Christianity in America. But I don't think we stay there. I don't think we wallow in it. We see data like this, and it's honestly not as surprising because it's been trending this way too. Mm-hmm. Now I think this is a charge for those who really fall into that integrated disciple. Look at right in that title. What is a disciple? A disciple needs to be making more disciples. That is the charge of. It's the Great Commission, go and make disciples of all nations. And so maybe it's an indictment against the disciples even that we're not replicating more disciples.
And this, here's where I'm going to go and say something that's going to make me very unpopular with some people, but, I want folks to think about it. What do we see in this research? A lot of people saying, yeah, I'm Christian, but their beliefs aren't particularly Christian beliefs. Mm. Then you look at your moral or your political issues, what have you, and like you pointed out, they lean far more conservative in a lot of these areas. And I guess I'd challenge people to say, what do you mean when you say you're a Christian? Mm. Do you mean, like we profess to try to do on the show, that you're putting Jesus Christ first? Do you believe that, that you're born again? That's the actual definition of what those terms mean. Or do you mean that you're pro-life? Do you mean that you're, you want more border security? Do you mean, and don't get me wrong, I'm independent, but I obviously lean conservative. You watch the show. I don't think that's a big secret there. So it's not necessarily that I'm going to disagree with you on some of these political issues. Some we might, but, not going to disagree on political issues. But I almost wonder if the term Christian in our culture today really to most people means more almost like a political stance than it does putting Jesus first and having Jesus be your Lord and Savior.
Yeah, just like we talked about with other phrases being co-opted, like separation of church and state, not really knowing what it means. Here is another example. I think we've got political ideologies co-opting the term Christian
Mm.
And that honestly does a disservice to Christianity. In the end, to our witness, it discredits it because it's white noise, that where people say, look, Christianity is in the majority. Well, when you take politics out of it, because everything is politicized now, where do people really fall in that? And where the rubber meets the road is in our practice of those beliefs. And overwhelmingly, I think, I don't know, we are, and Pastor Jay's mentioned this before too, that we are in a post-Christian society. Regardless of how people self-identify, it's really, you're known by your fruit, right?
Well, and that begs the question then what is the church's response to this trend? What should the church do? And I think the gut reaction response is to be, oh, well, we need to get our pastors in the pulpit and they need to be preaching all these individual doctrines so people know all these individual doctrines are really what true Christian belief is. And I'm not disagreeing with that, but I think the higher priority has to be the overarching message of, is Jesus Christ your Lord and Savior? And then the rest of that trickles down from there. Because, I mean, that is, if we focus, if we really bring back who Jesus is, what Jesus expects of us, what it means to have him be your Lord, what it means to, be saved and things like that. And then you get in what discipleship. That's another classic. These are kind of the priorities where, okay, so you teach people what the big picture means, all right, and then you can get from that, you can get to the individual doctrines underneath it. But the priority still has to be the focus on this big overarching picture, because otherwise all your congregation's going to hear is a series of unconnected individual teachings. And it's not unconnected. It's all connected by Christ. And so you start up here and then you show how this up here leads to this and leads to this and leads to this and leads to this. And then a part of that whole package also has to be discipleship making, so that you're learning all of this through a disciple who's further along in their faith walk than you are, and also encouraging you to then disciple someone who's not as far along as you are. That's, I think, the architecture that the Christian church's response to this has to take. Don't get so caught up in the individual issues, because that's the gut reaction we all want to do. Oh no, the Bible teaches that the baby's alive in the womb. We need to make sure we're preaching for the pulpit that Christians are pro-life. Christians are pro-life. Christians are pro-life. I agree. The Bible does teach that. I'm very adamantly pro-life, but you can't just do issue to issue to issue. You have to do Jesus, big picture, and outgrow from that.
Yeah, and certainly I would agree also that biblical illiteracy is a problem among that, because that's where you get your picture of Jesus, as God has revealed himself to us. I'd be willing to bet a lot of these self-professing Christians don't really know exactly what's in the Bible.
Yeah. Open it up, read it. It's a book, bestseller of all time. You can get a copy. You can get it on your phone.
Just because something's a bestseller doesn't make it a best reader.
Yes, amen. Amen to that.
Yeah.
All right, let's talk about our last story, because it's already almost 7 o'clock. So, Ben, I know I'm making you read a lot, but you were supposed to read this one. So
yeah, no, that's all good. This is our spoiler about, well, I won't tip our hand. But yeah, so, well, this has been in different news outlets, but this one's from the Christian News. Harvard University has appointed a new head of chaplains.
good for them.
Good. Well, yeah, I guess. This gentleman by the name of Greg Epstein, 44 years old, who already worked as humanist chaplain at the college, will organize other 40 or so chaplains from the Christian, Jewish, Islamic, Hindu, and Sikh faiths.
Humanist? What does that mean, Ben? Sorry, go ahead.
Apparently as much as chaplain means, because they unanimously voted him the head chaplain of Harvard University. He's an atheist.
Yeah.
So Mr. Epstein is an atheist chaplain, whatever that means, and who is now the president of Harvard University's chaplaincy. And again, as I said, this was a unanimous decision among 40 or so other chaplains from other faiths. So it's not like he was just put in there by the Harvard's president, the president of the school, but they voted on this. And he was raised Jewish. He's the author of the book Good Without God, What a Billion Non-Religious People Do Believe. And he says he wants to be there for those on campus who do not believe in God but still want to make good choices. I'll just read one quote that he has from here. Speaking of people who don't have any kind of necessary religious affiliation but still want to live an ethical life.
You just want to get me annoyed, don't you? I know what you're going to read. I know you just want to get my gander up. Go ahead, get me angry.
So, as if we haven't had enough soapboxes here, but this is another one. So his response to that,
we could build a tower.
Yeah, and do that.
No, that's not safe.
Milk crate
That's
challenge.
the milk crate challenge, not the soapbox challenge.
But anyway, his response to those students who want to still be good humans, good people, still be ethical, he says, we don't look to a God for answers. We are each other's answers.
Oh, it's painful. It's so painful.
This is from Mr. Epstein, the humanist, atheist chaplain of Harvard.
Before he jumps on his soapbox,
Talk fast, because I can't hold it in long.
what is there anything that indicates what duties the head of chaplains has? Like, what
This article doesn't really say what responsibilities he has.
Powers.
Who cares? Why is he even labeled a chaplain? Sorry.
Well, apparently also the English department and the phys ed department have merged because now there's semantic acrobatics is a course that's offered.
Wait, what?
Sorry, that was my soapbox.
Semantic acrobatics. I like that.
Where's your soft shoe?
All right. So
No, okay. What? No, but
it doesn't outline his responsibilities. Just that he's the president of chaplains and he's an atheist.
I mean,
he gets to.
He gets to what? I mean,
he gets to.
I mean, is it just a title that doesn't mean anything, and why are we getting upset about it, or is it a title that actually?
My assumption, and if anybody's listening to us and wants to correct me, please feel free to do so. My assumption is that just like in your chaplaincy within the military or any other organization, you have your head chaplain, so to speak, that kind of organizes if they're going to be assignments for people, especially.
They're assigned the people who.
Of their particular faith.
Yeah.
I don't know.
Exactly. Yeah. Again, what is this? I mean, I guess that's like one of my biggest questions is what does it mean for him to be?
Let me know when I'm unleashed.
Go ahead.
All right.
I'm gonna just browse the internet. And
if you can find that for us.
And here's why I don't think it matters. Okay, that's great. You find it, but my issue is not whether he's head chaplain, whether he's low man on the totem pole
head
chaplain.
Of student toenail clippings.
Head of student toenail clippings. That I'd be okay with. Okay, and it was vice president in charge of student toenail clippings. Yeah. My beef is why is he called a chaplain at all? Okay. Do terms mean nothing anymore? And okay, I got a question for any atheists that are watching out there, because this is another one that's born out of my years as a Christian apologist, okay? Is atheism a religion or not? Make a commitment, okay? Because if it's not, which is what I'm told all the time, atheists is, no, it's not really a religion, it's just science, or it's just this. We don't resort to faith at all. Oh my gosh, don't get me going on that one. Yeah, you do. We don't resort to faith. We're not a religion. Then why do you need a chaplain? Okay, I mean that just it boggles my mind. Historically, through all to the dawn of the term chaplain, it's had a religious connotation to it. Okay,
rooted, embedded in the word chapel.
Yeah,
chaplain.
Exactly. I mean, so. You can't have it both ways, but this is a broader social issue. Obviously, people want to have it both ways. They want to have their cake and eat it too. We want to have all the benefits that chaplains have, but we don't want to be called a religion. Well, you can't have it both ways. So is atheism a religion or isn't it? Make a commitment. You can't be both. All right. And to say you're not a religion, but to say that you can have an atheist chaplain, I'm sorry, is a contradiction in terms. All right. Unless you do linguistic gymnastics. So that's the first thing that kind of bugs me about all
semantic
this.
Semantic acrobatics.
I'm sorry, semantic acrobatics. Yes, it was even better. I did not give you enough credit. That was even better. All right. And then we get to the quote that Ben read that had me cringing in my seat. That the full quote is this gentleman told the New York Times, there's a rising group of people who no longer identify with any religious tradition, but still experience a real need for conversation and support around what it means to be a good human and live an ethical life. We don't need to look to a God for answers. We are each other's answers. All right, let me ask you this, Mr. Epstein, is that right? Yeah, Mr. Epstein. Go ahead. On your atheistic, naturalistic, there is no transcendent power, there's nothing above our individual people and our opinions viewpoint, all right? What does it mean to be a good human? Can you answer that for me, please?
Objectively.
Oh, yeah. What does it mean to live an ethical life? What do ethics even mean? Because if there's nothing but our opinions, there's nothing above us or maybe cultural norms, whatever you want to say, all right, then ethics also can't be anything other than us and above our opinions and our cultural norms, which means you may think one thing, I may think another. You may think that killing babies is wrong. I may think that killing babies is just a preparation for supper, okay? I don't. But, who's to judge between us and say that your view is the ethical one and my view isn't? On your worldview, there is no way to make that judgment. So explain to me how you, an atheist who does not hold to any transcendent authority whatsoever, can give anyone advice on what it means to live an ethical life. Now, before I get too many nasty grams and get people angry at me, am I saying that atheists cannot behave in a moral manner, cannot have internalized certain moral norms that we'd all agree are appropriate? No, I'm not saying that. Even atheists can rescue cats out of a tree and realize that's the right thing to do. Why is that?
Because it's written on their hearts.
Thank you. I do. See, we work well together. Exactly. Because under the Christian world, obviously we're made in the image of God, and morality comes from God's nature and his character, and that is imprinted upon our hearts. And so we do all recognize certain moral principles. C.S. Lewis at one point said in Mere Christianity, he talks about the fact that, look, people that want to say that there's all sorts of different moral codes out there really never looked at the moral codes. We may have differences of opinion about who one should be selfless toward, all right? Whether it be just your family, whether it be just your friends, whether it be your town, whether it be everybody as a whole. But selfishness is never held up as being virtuous in any culture, historically, anywhere in the world. Everybody agrees that we have this moral value of that we should be selfless. It's just a question of how we implement that. So we all have this moral law written on our hearts, as the Bible teaches. It's all there. But the difference is, I, as a Christian, can explain to you why it's there. You, as an atheist, cannot. The fact that it's there is completely contradictory to your worldview. So I just find that so
intellectually
backwards.
Dishonest.
Yeah. I mean, to say we want, I want to be an atheist chaplain because there are other people out there who don't believe in God, who still want to know what it means to be a good human, to live an ethical life. Well, I got news for you. You're not the one that can help them with that. Your worldview is vacuous when it comes to that. And I mean that in the literal sense. There's nothing there to base on which for you to base your advice other than, well, I feel this way, so I think you should feel this way. I mean, that's not ethics. That's totalitarianism, okay? And he betrays it in his very next comment when he says, we don't look to a God for answers. We are each other's answers. Well, if you're each other's answers, then there is no transcendent standard. You're admitting that there's nothing other than everybody's individual opinions.
The moral majority.
Yeah, so there is no such thing as ethics. You can't teach anything. All you can do is poll people. I mean, that's basically what it boils down to.
Yeah, pretty much. Survey says.
Survey says murder's wrong today. Come back, check with us again tomorrow.
Right. Yeah.
Yeah.
I want to put, I'll say, 60% of my frustration on Mr. Epstein, but the other 40% of my frustration, I want to talk to these other chaplains who unanimously voted him into this position, Christians included. Christian chaplains.
Well, I don't know. Look at the Barna Group study. Where they
yeah, right. So, I don't know. And I guess that just goes to show you, like, where is our meaning here? As Christians, as other Christian chaplains at Harvard, do they go into, I don't know. How are you making your decisions here? Actually, I was watching something.
It sounds like from the article I found from the New York Times that they're making their decision based on the fact that his main goal seems to be to keep the lines of communication open between different faiths. And because I guess he doesn't have one,
Doesn't he? Or do they consider it a faith? I mean, that's
I
the
don't
thing.
know.
They got to commit to
But-
that.
Right.
No, you're right.
How is
But
he a chaplain
because he
then?
doesn't, that he's not going to favor one over the other.
Well, I'm going to unanimously vote cell phones for keeping the lines of communication open between our faiths. They can do
Landon.
just as good a
Cell
job,
phones, 2021.
And that
an
his-
even better job than an atheist chaplain.
Um,
Um,
and my favorite thing is that I've got quotes here from students. One is a 20-year-old electrical engineering student, and she doesn't even refer to him as Mr. Epstein. She says, Greg's leadership isn't about theology, it's about cooperation between people of different faiths and bringing together people who wouldn't normally consider themselves religious. I'm like, okay.
Anytime you're talking about God, that is theology. Whatever you think about God is your
Hey,
theology.
You know what? I have a hard time
Um,
talking about my chaplain as anything other than I might refer to them by their first names, but the word pastor or father is usually
Yeah.
before.
Yeah, and well, this was another interesting thing that I saw somebody else had mentioned as I was looking at other articles on this. If you go to Harvard and you look at like inscribed on their gate, like to get into the school, there's I forget what are the words? It's Veritas, Christos, something. So
Mhm.
basically Latin words for
Truth for Christ and the church.
truth for Christ and the church. And that's
The-
what they
The
were
Veritas
founded
Forum.
on.
So
The
the-
Veritas Forum is something I think is
Yeah.
based
Yeah.
on.
The Puritan colonists who settled in New England in the 1630s had a nagging concern about the churches they were building. How would they ensure that their clergymen would be literate? Their answer was Harvard University, a school that was established to educate the ministry and adopt the motto, Truth for Christ and the Church. It was named after a pastor, John Harvard, and it would be
Was he an atheist pastor?
no, I don't know. I can't speak to that. It would be. I assume he
willing to
was a
bet that.
Puritan, but anyway, it would be more than 70 years before the school had a president who was not a clergyman.
And they've effectively betrayed all pretense of their inscription there. They may as well take that gate down.
Yeah, they might as
because yeah.
Sorry, this guy looks like he's about to fall over. Trying to make sure he stands up. There we go. That's better. All right. I do want to, before we close out here, I do want to say one thing. I agree with Mr. Epstein that whether you embrace any particular faith tradition or not, you do, and some people struggle, they need to be shown how to be a good human, and these are important lessons for everybody to learn, all right? And if you're struggling with, whether believing you have value, for example, things like that, and you're not willing to listen to the Christian answers for that, well, that's what psychologists are for. We have things out there, and I don't say that belittlingly. I mean that is the case. I mean, if you need that type of guidance, there are secular avenues to get the kind of help and counseling that you would need. But if you're coming to a chaplaincy, the nature of a chaplaincy is to get a spiritual element to that advice that you're going to receive from whatever faith tradition the chaplaincy comes from. And so trying to insert into that, an atheist chaplaincy literally makes no sense. It literally makes sense. So I don't want to belittle what he's saying his mission is in that regard. I agree that people that need help, that need guidance in these areas should be able to get it. I just say if you're looking for that kind of secular guidance from a purely secular perspective, there are avenues for that. It's just not through a chaplaincy. There's no reason why. Again, we need to try to have our cake and eat it too. It's kind of like everybody. I'm not going to go. I was going to go somewhere. I won't go there. That'll get me in trouble. I don't want to open up that can of worms. But I'll tell you all when we're off the air. But let's just say that there are cultural movements where people want to remove all categories, where they want to say, now you already know where I was going to go probably, but we want to say, well, these characteristics belong to this category. I don't feel that, I think there's some disparity here. Therefore, I think I should be entitled to all of these benefits, characteristics, whatever there would be from this category, where, sometimes categories can be discriminatory and we need to get rid of them. Other times categories exist for a reason. And this is but we see this all the time. We see it in religious traditions. People want to say they're Christian even though they don't adopt any of the Christian viewpoints, you know. Why not just call yourself something else? Categories are okay. They're necessary to define certain groups. Chaplaincy is a category that has a faith base to it. You know, you want to be an atheist, go for it. I think you're wrong. I think you're in for a surprise at the end, but you know, you're free to do that. But you don't, just because, you know, we have these faith traditions have something called a chaplaincy doesn't mean you need to get in on it. It's okay.
Yeah.
By being an atheist, you've chosen to remove yourself from what this category is. And if that's your choice, that's fine, but there are consequences to that choice.
Well, and I think I would take it even a step further, that by including yourself, an atheist, by including yourself into a chaplaincy, you have actively devalued what both of those mean.
Yeah.
You've actively devalued what it is to be a chaplain and what it is to be an atheist. So you're left with nothing.
Yeah. I think that's a good note to end on. So, all right. We've run late. It's already 7:13 here by my clock. Hopefully, for my last several soapboxes and Ben's beautiful closing statement, our audio and video were synchronized that time. So if people share it, yes, that will still come across looking well. So, hey, just a reminder, if you weren't watching us live tonight and you have any comments, questions about anything we're saying, go ahead and you can still be part of the show. Put them in the YouTube comment section for the YouTube video. And when we come back next week, we will pull those up. We will read them. We will respond to them just like we did at the start of this show. All right. Otherwise, I will just say, if anybody's here local to the Joppa, Maryland area, feel free. You are invited to come join us here at Trinity Lutheran Church. Now, normally I'd be saying that we have two services each Sunday at 9 o'clock a.m. traditional service and 11 o'clock a.m. contemporary service, but I'm not going to say that this week. Ben, why am I not going to say that this week?
Because this week, just this week, we have one service.
One service,
10 a.m.
and since you're like,
So we still have those, but just
we
not
do,
this
but
week.
not this week. We'll be back again on the air, and I can advertise that at the 9 o'clock and 11 o'clock before the next time, as long as there's not another remnant of a hurricane that comes through or a very premature blizzard. But Ben, what's so special about this one service, and what time is it? I can't remember if you mentioned that or not.
Yes, it's at 10 o'clock, 10 a.m., not 9, not 11, 10. And this is our kickoff. So we are kicking off our fall ministries. There's going to be food there. We did correct one thing. So one of the food trucks that we advertise is not going to be there, but we've got a replacement. So there will be food. There will be games. There will be some music. And, of course, our service. We want you to come and attend and stay afterwards for some time of just fellowship and what it means to restart. That's our theme. So we're looking for a restart. Come hit the restart button with us.
So come join us for a great outdoor worship service this Sunday. 10 o'clock is the start time. Stay afterwards for some wonderful fellowship and food and games and all that. So, all right, that's good. I think we're good enough. We can sign off now. We will be back here on this program next Wednesday. We're here every Wednesday, just about at 5:30 p.m. There's a lot of other things on the channel here. Please feel free to peruse it. And again, if you haven't subscribed to the YouTube channel yet, why not? Do it now, right now. Go. We'll wait.
Till our audio syncs up.
No, stop. Do you not know how to influence people? All right, this is a lawyer trick, all right? When you're cross-examining someone, like especially in deposition, you ask them the question, and when they answer, you don't say anything. You just stare at them, and you make them very uncomfortable. And because after silence, people need to fill the void. They need to fill silence. That makes them uncomfortable, just like you needed to fill the void and couldn't just stay quiet. But I'm making a point. It's a brilliant point. All right.
Say goodnight, Gracie.
Good night, Gracie. Thank you, Mary Kay, for everything you've done for us tonight,
Thanks,
including
Mary Kay.
cutting me off when I'm rambling. Thank you, Ben.
Thank you, Ken.
And thank you all for watching. We will see you right here on the Trinity Talk YouTube channel, Facebook page next week, Wednesday, 5:30. God bless.